So welcome, first of all, and can you talk a little bit about yourself, what it is that you're doing, and what brings you here at TechChill?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm the CEO of Latvian Startup Association, Startin. So we are an NGO that represents Latvian startups. So we have more than 92 members, startups, legal entities, and we kind of go and do three things on their behalf. So first we do policy advocacy on their behalf. So we see ourselves as a kind of strategic partner for Ministry of Economics, for our investment development agency, our Riga investment agency. So we're going to go and talk with them and tell them what startups need. So we kind of lobby on their behalf. Then the second thing we do is we do community building for our members. And the third, we do data. So we are the holder of national startup database in Latvia. So we, based on that, we have a public live database. And based on that, we also do a startup report each year that we just announced the startup report 2025 just a month ago in February.
Right. So let's start from the beginning then. So what you just talked about. What do the startups need then? Like, what do you advocate for?
So that's a good question. At the moment, we see that startups really. So it based on where the startup is, right? So it's based on the stage they are at. But at the moment, we see there is stagnation when it comes to number of startups.
Okay.
So in our opinion, because the data.
Like there are fewer early stage startups.
Exactly. So what we see is really there's been a stagnation in the number of new startups. So we see last couple of years, on average, there's about 60 new startups. But this is not counting the ones that die. And as you know, startup life cycle, oftentimes they don't pass 1 year. So we see about 60. So what we really want is for us to see 100 new startups each year. And we think for this funnel to really grow, we have to do the government has to do something. They have to do some kind of new policies, and what we're trying now to push is for policies that really are very specific to creating new startups.
I mean, to be fair though, as far as I remember the European data as a whole, this problem is like continent-wide. It's not necessarily just Latvian. And what do you think is the reason of it? Because like it used to be growing like year over year, and I think now we're definitely seeing it sort of plateauing.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think. In a way, we've seen some maturity, maybe in the ecosystem in general, because startups, our station is 10 years old. Our anniversary this year, we're 10 years old. In Estonia, the ecosystem is even a little bit older. So in Baltics, it feels there's some maturity. So the mass, maybe the hype, the mass is slowly decreasing. So there needs to be some kind of incentive to get this thing going again, to get this new wave. That's what, at least from our perspective, that's what they think. To get this new wave, there needs to be some sort of push, and I think EU is understanding this now with their competitiveness agenda. There are all these initiatives coming out of this Innovation Act. 28 regime, EU Inc., all this is coming out, and I think they're now trying to understand, okay, we're slowing down, and there needs to be, but the data is actually interesting because from 2013 till about 2023 or 2024 or something like that, the period we actually had more startups in Europe than in the US during this period. So it's very interesting that we actually have a lot of startups in Europe. It's just that how many of them grow big enough to make significant income.
Yeah. If you look at the funnel, then the outcomes are mostly concentrated in the US rather than in Europe. Okay, so this is really interesting, and I read a story somewhere in Latvian media about the announcement of you as the new CEO of Startin.LV last year, and it was also said that this signifies a change in focus. So basically, what used to be a community building focus has become now the policy focus. So why did you need? Why did you feel a need for this change to happen? Like, is it a maturing thing, or is it something else?
So for me, it was not really my decision. It was the decision of the board.
Like you were brought in basically as the policy expert.
Exactly. So it was the decision of the board. I was brought in, and really the idea of why that is because there's a lot of organizations doing several type of activities in our ecosystem. So we are just one of the organizations, and as the ecosystem 10 years more is growing, a lot of organizations are coming out because they see opportunities to do certain, like to specialize in certain things. So we have TechChill that's doing conferences, they're doing activities even abroad. And then we have a startup house, Riga, that is doing community building. They have so many events, they're doing community building. Then we have Riga Tech Girls that's focusing on creating new founders potentially. We have Start School, we have, so all these kind of organizations are doing certain things, and we kind of, the board looked back and they understood that to kind of save resources and use resources efficiently, we should specialize in certain areas. And lobbying has been, in a way, a little bit kind of underrepresented because it's a very specific thing. Not everyone is not very fun sometimes. So a lot of people, there's not many organizations that want to really do that as a full-time thing. So what they thought is that maybe the association is the most kind of legitimate organization to do it because we represent startups directly. We are the members organization, and in a way they thought, okay, we'll specialize in this. So there is some division of kind of activities that each organization, and not so much overlap. That's the story.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what are your KPIs? Like, what are you tracking?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we are now, what is an association? Of course, we are tracking. We are looking mostly at a startup number, so how many startups in Latvia there are. So our aim is for there to be more startups. So in comparison, Latvia has about 560 startups, something like that. Lithuania has 1,100. Estonia has 1,500. So we have the least amount of startups. So right now we think the focus should really be on the startups, how many startups we have. Then we are tracking the taxes they pay. So how big is their economic return to the state? And then lastly, we're also tracking turnover. So how much turnover they're generating. Profit is not a best measure for startups. A lot of industries they're tracking profit, but we think profit is for startups. It's oftentimes the annual is growing, profit's not, and that makes sense for a startup why that's happening. But then we also want to track, of course, investment and stuff like that. But investment is also a very tricky metric to track. Sometimes there's big growth just because one company raised, and it doesn't represent the whole ecosystem sometimes. So it's a tricky measure. I think investment I think taxes really. Together with turnover and number of startups is a really good metric. And even previously, we still track the number of employees, but it's also a very kind of, sometimes it's confusing for policymakers. And I'll be honest, we go to them and they say, oh, okay, they only employ 5,600 people or something. That's not a lot, there's industries that employ tens or 20s or 30,000 people. And that for them makes, so it's a small, but it's not really small. In Latvia, the turnover for the employee count is 610 million. So it's on average, one employee is like generating 130,000 euros. So it's very high added value sector, and I feel like employees sometimes it's very misleading to say that. Of course, we still track it, but for us, it's these three metrics I think that are really good.
And so how can you actually sort of encourage and catalyze this like creation of new startups? What are the practical ways that you employ?
So that's so what we are doing in a way. Of course, there's really three kind of areas that we can look at. So first is really access to capital. So, and that is access to quality capital, access to not easily maybe, but accessible, realistically accessible capital for super early stage teams. And we're talking about teams that only have a presentation, a full-time team that's dedicated, they've done market research, they have a business kind of initial business roadmap. So those sort of teams should be able to get some sort of financing. And we're talking about, for example, a ticket worth of 50, 70,000 euros that they can then use to create MVP, to get customers, so they don't have to rely on their savings, so they don't have to look at some sort of strange combination of grant schemes where they get something from this scheme, something from this scheme. So for us, I think the government often says, okay, this will be money burnt, yes, but we analyzed a similar type of program in Latvia that was from 2013 to 2017, and we looked at such a program. It did exactly that. It gave 50,000 euros to 60 tech teams, and we saw that the return to state budget in taxes 10 years after is 17 times more than the initial program cost.
That's a good venture level return. That's fine.
And we looked at that and we said, okay, 15% of those startups actually alive, doing very successful. And that's a good return. 15 for early stage, super high risk investment. 15% is good. So that's really one of the things that we're talking about. Second thing we're talking about is education, entrepreneurship education. There's a lot of organizations doing that. We're also trying to get ourselves involved more in that, to kind of talk with them, to explain, to go to schools, to talk. And there needs to be some systemic thing that where we talk about why entrepreneurship is good, why startups are great, and why sometimes it's good to work for a startup. You don't always have to create a startup. You can go work for a startup, get the confidence, and then something because you know this very well, the multiplicator effect. From Fuel, Latvian Printful and Printify merger, Fuel, they have about 25 startups come out from ex-employees.
Absolutely, that's how the ecosystem flywheel basically works.
And the third thing I want to mention lastly is also, of course, regulatory burdens. Everything that comes to how easy it is to do something in certain sectors. So, for example, medtech, what's the regulation like? Maybe in a certain areas such as pharmacy, we could maybe do, because Latvia is a very small country, so we could maybe do the certain licensing faster or something like that. So for the companies to kind of start iterating, start selling faster, or what's the role of the government on procuring public procurement, innovation procurement in Latvia is extremely low. So this is something that we should encourage. We should say it's fine to sometimes fail, but it's not fine to not do anything, you know?
I mean, again, these low levels of public procurement of innovation, I believe this is also a European-wide issue, and I think Commissioner Zakharieva mentioned it yesterday. But speaking of this sort of streamlining of licensing in certain sectors, is this something that you are, in a way, borrowing from what Lithuania did with fintech like 10, 15 years ago?
I think now the Bank of Latvia, together with Fintech Association, they're trying to understand, they're trying to work together in a way to kind of streamline this process. I know there was a fintech related conference a few months ago where the Bank of Latvia CEO, President of Bank of Latvia, he said, we want Latvia to be the next fintech hub or something like that. So for example, I think now they're trying to understand this and they're trying to work on this, and they're especially with this MICE licensing, licensing. So I think they're now trying to do that. Because in these very regulated sectors, it's extremely important for the industry to understand that the regulator and is also understanding their business needs. And this is extremely important. In Lithuania, this is what they did. The regulator is going to conferences, like talking with people and explaining the businesses why this is a good place. And this is when business feels confident. This is when the company is like, okay, the regulator is here. He wants to explain to us, or she wants to explain to us something. So they feel confident. They're like, okay, this will be our next destination. And there's now opportunities. If I read correctly, that Poland is now kind of more risk averse, and they don't want to do so much of the crypto licensing in Poland. So maybe there's opportunity for Latvia there as well. So we have to look at what our neighbors are doing and use those opportunities where they don't want to maybe go so much into. We could then leverage that.
Right. And I was just thinking, like, if we look at the bigger picture once again in terms of startup creation, I think so. While you are making this effort on the policy level and the government level, at the same time, with the advent of AI and generative AI and large language models, it just also democratizes hugely the entire development process, like in a way that you don't necessarily need to be a developer or to hire a developer in order to create something that's good enough for an MVP. So So do you think that this will also have a significant effect on the startup creation rate in Latvia?
Yes.
And do you think that you would be able to distinguish what was your effort, what was the result brought by your effort, and what was just the what was brought up by this AI proliferation?
Yeah, this is a very good good point. Of course, you can as whenever you do policy, you can never kind of measure because the ecosystem is so interconnected. It would be hard to say. So when you say you see like a new unicorn emerge, for example, how much of that is the company's success and how much of that is the country's like success.
Yeah.
So it's you can always question, okay, maybe the country, you know, the tax was great, so that's why they became a unicorn. So it's a questionable thing. But back to the AI question, that's a very good thing, and I feel like right now is a perfect time, right? It's a perfect time for also young people to experiment, and I'm a part of a jury member judging those young entrepreneurs, kind of not judging, but being there and commenting and seeing what they're doing. And there's a really good junior achievement kind of events happening where they gather all the students and they make sort of companies and stuff. And a lot of them are using this, leveraging this AI, and I see teams that vibe coded SaaS or something, and the ideas are very interesting, sometimes actually very unique that I've never seen before. So it's very good. So I feel like right now is a great time. We need to look at how we can leverage this time best. The government, and also we will help them understand how we can leverage this. And we also seeing this now. So we looked at some AI companies, and already in the last 3-4 years, there's almost 3 times more AI companies in Latvia. So it's growing rapidly. They're also making money. So the turnover is there. So I think now is a good time, and it's a must that we leverage this time. So it's excellent. Yeah, I hope we see more AI companies in Latvia.
So yeah, hopefully the future is bright. Robert, thank you so much for taking the time, and good luck with everything you're doing with Startin.LV.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.